Joy Reid is offering up some joyous, unsolicited advice to the president. Stripping away naturalization could backfire. Speaking with Representative Pramila Jayapal on Thursday, Reid suggested that Melania Trump could face deportation in the future because of her husband's denaturalization threats. Let's watch.
If we ever get a Democratic president, they could say, I don't like Melania Trump. She wasn't born here. She was born in Slovenia. She is a naturalized citizen. She's out of here. And by the way, Ivana Trump, the late Ivana Trump, who's buried in the golf course in New Jersey in Donald Trump's golf club, she wasn't an American citizen. And 3 of her children are Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka. And maybe the next Democratic president says, you know what? I don't like the Trumps. And so we're going to denaturalize all of the Trump children whose mother was a foreigner at the time.
When asked if Congress realizes the full downside of the denaturalization idea, this was Jayapal's take.
That's exactly right. And I think that, you're asking for a level of logic from these Republican Congress members that they just don't have. It's turned into a cult party.
During a visit last week to so-called Alligator Alcatraz, Trump did indeed float the idea of deporting naturalized citizens who have committed serious crimes.
Yeah, I guess it's a fine thought experiment, and I myself use slippery slope arguments all the time, so I guess I won't really fault Joy Reid for going there. I guess what I would have liked to hear from Representative Jayapal was, well, we would never do that because we don't believe in deporting people because we don't like them, and I cannot conceive of a future Democratic Party that would do that.
Which
and instead she was like, yeah, what if we did that? I don't know. It's kind of a weird response. I mean, that would be bad. I mean, that would be a serious escalation. Trump. I obviously don't agree that we should kick. I mean, people who commit violent crimes should be imprisoned. If they are not citizens and if they're here illegally, they can be imprisoned and then deported or deported to a prison or whatever is the proper procedure. That's fine. People who are American citizens and commit serious crimes, that is just as serious. And I'm occasionally this focus on the immigration status is getting around our crime problem. We have a crime problem, a violent crime problem in many American cities. Some of these crimes are being committed by illegal immigrants, but not all of them. And I don't care whether it's an illegal immigrant or a lawful immigrant or a citizen or somebody whose ancestors came over on the Mayflower. I want violent criminals put away to keep our cities safe. We can't. I don't think we can denaturalize. I am not up to date on this aspect of the law, but that is the serious solution. Not not trying to deport them. I think so. I don't know why we need to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. So denaturalization was something that was almost unheard of, I think, up until very recently.
That's for someone who becomes a citizen and then we're stripping away their citizenship. I mean, possibly that could be done in some of the cases if people commit very serious violent crimes who came here and got citizenship, and maybe that could be taken away. I guess I'm not necessarily wholly opposed to that, but
I think previously, whenever the suggestion was made at all, which was very, very seldom, the idea was if someone was a naturalized citizen and then committed actual treachery, so somebody comes from the old Soviet Union, becomes a naturalized U.S. citizen, and then turns out to be a Soviet spy, then you take the citizenship away.
But more importantly, you imprison them.
Right.
We would not send them back to the Soviet Union in this case. We would not send them back to China. We would imprison them.
Right. No.
Just getting the people out of the country is not necessarily and always the point.
No, and this denaturalization argument...
We could take away their right to vote, I guess, is the...
Yeah, well, as
fine.
as happens with people who are born here and are
incarcerated anyway.
Felonies and so forth. The danger, I think, is that the denaturalization element seems to be part of this broader, very, very hard line on immigration. And the idea of the government using immigration policy to crack down on people with whom they disagree in various ways. Now, Congressman Andy Ogles, who I find a rather crank-like figure, but in any event, he was sort of suggesting that it could be done in the case of Zoran Mamdani. And his justifications for that were incredibly dubious. Talking about an old rap lyric when Mamdani was a rapper, which was not expressing support for a terrorist group. It was citing, without getting too deep into the weeds, a very contentious case in New York where people were convicted of contributing to a charity which they said was a legit charity and which authorities say was connected with Hamas. The other thing that Ogles cited was the refusal of Mamdani to condemn the phrase globalize the Intifada. Not, I should stress, using that phrase, but refusing to condemn it. So the idea that someone should face deportation when in the case of Mamdani they are a US citizen, that seems a ludicrous and dangerous suggestion to me.
Yes.
And therefore I worry about the mainstreaming of this denaturalization idea.
Yeah, I've said it a million times. People should not face deportation for speech. We draw a ironclad difference in our post-Enlightenment tradition between words and actions. Words are protected by our First Amendment. The government cannot go after you for just expression, even if it's vile expression, even if it's bad. We allow a great range of discussion because we think that's the best way to run our society, is to allow that. Deeds are different, so if you commit crimes, violent crimes in particular, maybe certainly some kind of punishment can follow. Maybe it could have to do with citizenship. That's fine, but certainly I would agree to not extend it for words. The only other thing I want to say on this subject is in terms of the going after the Trump family. I get it, and you'll probably think this is ridiculous, but it is the view of millions of conservatives that the going after the Trump family thing has already happened, right? That Trump has been pursued legally in a variety of municipalities for a variety of things.
Mostly
some of which
crimes, I would say.
Some of which I think are the argument that their crimes is stronger. Some of which are weaker. But this idea that in some far-flung universe, Democrats, after Trump's actions, would have the bright idea to pursue legal charges against Trump is something, I'm just saying, many Republicans will find ridiculous. They'll say that already happened. So there's the escalation you have in mind has already occurred, and now it's our turn to escalate things, which I think is a bad tendency. But
yeah, I mean, I think there was very abundant evidence, particularly in the Mar-a-Lago case and in the January the 6th cases, that Donald Trump broke the law, and he got away with it, which I think is a very sad day for America that he did get away with it, and I think that those cases were rightfully brought about very obvious illegal action of which there was compelling and significant evidence. We have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising right after this. Stay with us.
A new bombshell regarding disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein this morning. Axios obtained a memo from the DOJ that concludes Epstein did not have a client list and that he died by suicide.
The agencies also say they found no evidence that Epstein blackmailed powerful people. The memo indicates that the Trump administration will release video proof showing that nobody entered the area where Epstein was held on the night he died.
Back in May, both Patel and Bongino said on Fox News they did believe that Epstein killed himself. Now, many on X and on Blue Sky are pointing to a Fox interview from February with Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Users are saying the video shows an apparent contradiction with the newly released findings. Let's watch.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
Liberal news outlet Midas Touch wrote on Blue Sky, the Epstein list went from sitting on Pam Bondi's desk right now to there is no list in just a few months.
Comedian and podcaster Dave Smith wrote on X, the Trump administration is lying about Epstein. Everyone knows it. Pay attention to who will admit that and who will run cover.
The memo indicates that there will be no more disclosures about the Epstein case as the agency says it's not warranted. The memo reads, through this review, we found no basis to revisit the disclosure of those materials and will not permit the release of child pornography.
This is outrageous, given what they have said previously. Yeah, here's the government. Oh, yes, we cannot see. There's no Epstein client list.
Right.
Look, so there's two possibilities here, neither of which are very good. One is that there's no client list. There's truly no damning involvement of anyone else. It's just that him and Ghislaine Maxwell were just sexually abusing people, and it was just the two of them doing it, even though he recorded everything that went on in his residence, and he extensively traveled and catered to and inculcated relationships with powerful and wealthy people. from both political parties and from every aspects of finance and education and elite circles, and that was just all for no reason whatsoever. He just liked being friends with Bill Gates and others. Right. Okay. And there was nothing to it. Okay, fine. That's one possibility. So now that would still be totally contrary to what Pam Bondi and what everyone else has said all along, including in the administration. Mm-hmm. So shame on them if that's the case, because then they misled their own supporters and they clout chased and they were dishonest and they were liars. It's contemptible what they've done. The other case is actually, the other situation is more nefarious, which is that there is something to Epstein's connections to everyone, and it is being kept secret for some kind of perhaps national security justification. This is just a rumor, and I don't like to spread conspiracy theories, but I have heard it wondered very openly whether he is an intelligence asset. He provided information on powerful people to our government or the Israeli government or someone else. Given how aggressively they're shutting the book on this and saying, nope, nothing there, that's all. Yeah. It's going to make the possibility of that, raise the specter of that being the reason, how I would cautiously say that.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is obviously going to stoke massive public suspicion for quite understandable reasons. Yes. I mean, let's start off with the fact that Jeffrey Epstein very obviously and ostentatiously cultivated friendships with extremely wealthy and extremely powerful people. Then he was assaulting and abusing very young women on a massive scale. It seems just hard to credibly argue that he himself never, as it were, connected those two things together, as in, I could use this influence or my friendships with the powerful to inure myself to some extent from the repercussions of his behavior in this respect. So in that sense, it's very, very suspicious. I also think a lot of people will have questions about the semantics of all of this. Like, whenever we talk about a client list, do people really, is the argument that there isn't one, that there is no document in his possession saying, here is my client list, A to Z, that presumably isn't
These
there.
are the girls I specifically trafficked to them on this date. Yes, exactly. It is plausible that document does not exist.
Right.
But they have so many and tons of files that were released. Also, it's worth pointing out, it could be that people in who should have known or done more to thwart Epstein or to bring him to justice much earlier are now trying to protect themselves, including Pam Bondi, who was the Attorney General of Florida for a relevant portion of time, I believe 2010 through the end of the decade, where Epstein was undergoing certain legal matters related to his prosecution and other things, so that maybe they just want to, I guess that's a middle ground nefariousness or just corruption. They think it'll be embarrassing if they release more information about this. On the suicide thing specifically, I personally have always found it plausible that he did in fact kill himself. They're saying there's security footage that nobody else entered. I know prisons are neglectful places, and the usual objections I hear to that, well, how could you think that, Robbie? How could it be the case that the cameras aren't working in the jail or that they left him alone for that long? Like, you don't know prison very well if you think that's unreasonable. Right. The cameras are never working. People die in prison all the time from medical conditions when they should be given treatment because nobody cares. Right. It's not that some lowly, underpaid security guards, went off for a smoke break for an extended period of time when they were supposed to be watching him. That is actually very plausible. So I am perfectly willing to believe he did kill himself, and also he has nothing to live for at that point. He's disgraced. It's over for him. He's gonna go. It's plausible to me that he would do that. Yeah. That there's no more information on people who were involved in what he was doing. That begins to strain credulity. Itself.
Yeah. I mean, the suicide thing I think is plausible either way. I mean, I am critical of lots of things that I consider conspiracy theories. I think with Epstein, it is so shady and it just smells to high heaven in so many different ways that there are legitimate grounds to be skeptical of it. Now, it may well be, that the evidence is quite clear that he did kill himself, and I think, as you say, that is plausible, but it is the other part that is much more sketchy.
Indeed. Next up on Rising is President Obama trolling President Trump. We will discuss.
Elon Musk's Grock is going off the rails. The AI chatbot yesterday suddenly started spewing hate speech about Jewish people and referring to itself as a mecha Hitler.
This is a weird one. In a since-deleted post, Grock referred to Israel as that clingy ex still whining about the Holocaust. Grock recently made headlines in May when it immediately started ranting about white genocide in South Africa in unrelated prompts.
The Grock account released a statement about the slew of posts, saying, "We are aware of recent posts made by Grock and are actively working to remove the inappropriate posts. Since being made aware of the content, XAI has taken action to ban hate speech before Grock posts on X. We are able to quickly identify and update the model where training could be improved." It all comes after long-time complaints Musk has about the model undermining right-wing narratives and vowing that it would be updated. Musk also has been hyping up Wednesday's release of the new version of the AI chatbot, Grock 4.
Now, the Anti-Defamation League spoke out about the incident, writing, "What we're seeing from Grock LLM right now is irresponsible, dangerous, and anti-Semitic. Plain and simple, this supercharging of extremist rhetoric will only amplify and encourage the anti-Semitism that is already surging on X and on many other platforms."
Dropsite News reporter Ryan Grimm called out Grock's posts, saying, quote, "Hitler linking Judaism and communism was central to his early efforts to politicize his anti-Semitism and gather support for exterminating enemies of the far right. He called it Judeo-Bolshevism. Seeing Grock repeat it is foul beyond words."
Very Ryan Grimm take. This is obviously very bad. It is, as you described, weirdly obsessed with Hitler right now. Clearly, they fiddled with something in a way that they some kind of filter related to how it handles this topic that has gone awry, as it did with the South Africa question. This is similar, but in the complete opposite direction to when I think it was ChatGPT, the image generating thing had some kind of diversity check where like it would not, if you were like draw a white king, it just wouldn't do it. It would not make you a picture of a white person. It made everything diversity, which was kind of funny. This is maybe less funny.
A lot less, I would say.
Certainly the hate group monitor, watchdog people are not happy about it. So this should be fixed. I think they will fix it. I can't imagine Elon Musk wants this thing he really likes on the platform to be engaged in this. I would caution people. You know, I saw people reacting to this like both ways. I mean, some people were like, "Oh, it's finally been freed to say what it really thinks." We should, as AI becomes more and more a part of our lives, we must resist the temptation to humanize it, to act like it's a person. It is not a person. It is not alive. It doesn't have independent thoughts. It is a machine. It is not self-aware and self-conscious. This is not its own thoughts. This is simply the inputs and the way it was programmed. And like I'm saying, people apparently are, I don't want to sound like an old fogey who's panicked about what the kids these days are doing. Apparently, like, young people talk to it and it's just reaffirming everything. Take away the Hitler context of it for a minute. It's just, if you talk to it about the things you're upset about, it responds, and people are like developing relationships with it, like that Joaquin Phoenix movie, Her. It is not alive. It is not a substitute for a friendship. It doesn't care about you. It is not a thing with feelings. And I think insisting upon that is going to be more important as we go through the future.
Look, obviously I take the point that Grock is not a person tweeting
it's not your friend.
Things, but I think that if someone is programming it or supplying the algorithms or whatever it works off, I think it is, this is pretty grossly anti-Semitic stuff. Talking about radical leftists with Ashkenazi surnames pushing anti-white hate and, basically lauding Hitler because he would have had the right idea to deal with these people. It is like the most base and crude elements of anti-Semitism. So whatever they tweaked to create that, obviously there are questions to be asked about how and why that was done. It is pretty appalling stuff. And I don't think just saying, well, Grock's not a person, well, I know, but the fact that those answers were produced and put on a site that has so many millions of users, that is obviously troublesome. I'm not saying that you're saying it's not. I understand
no, it needs to be,
you are.
Absolutely needs to be fixed immediately. I quite liked the service before this most recent update. Now, I don't really, you can do like Grock, is this true on posts? I don't know. I generally found it pretty helpful and somewhat neutral. I guess Elon thought it was undercutting, again, right-wing positions too much. I thought it often was giving a pretty good summary of the, while saying, well, some people believe this for this reason, and some people believe this for this reason, and it seemed pretty good to me. Again, I'm generally optimistic about AI and how it will help us and make it easier to establish sources of information. I'm bullish on this technology, but I am not bullish because I think it's going to take over. Like I don't think we're on the verge of like the singularity and we're all going to be slaves to some computer mind that's evil and secretly Hitler. Yep. It's not making these choices independently. They reprogrammed it in a way. They should unprogram it. Grock is not doing this. Grock is a team of people, is the man behind the curtain.
Right, but I mean, obviously it would be vastly controversial if any AI engine had done this. But the fact that it is Elon's baby obviously does create sharper questions, because there's that infamous thing in 2023 where someone had tweeted about Jews fomenting anti-white hate, and Musk pop up to say, you have said the actual truth, and advertisers and others were understandably outraged. He supported the AfD in Germany, which is a far-right party. There are reasons why there are concerns with him.
Well, that does it for us on Rising Live today. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Hope you liked our new studio. Let us know in the comments. I'll be reading them, how you feel about it, and maybe what we should adorn this desk with. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our content. For those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're also available, of course, in podcast format. And I'll see you back here tomorrow. See ya. President Trump is not too happy with Russian President Vladimir Putin over his continued invasion of Ukraine.
Here's the president at his cabinet meeting yesterday.
We're not happy with Putin. I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, because he's killing a lot of people, and a lot of people are dying, and it should end. And I don't know, we get a lot of thrown at us by Putin. For you want to know the truth, he's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
Now, Trump said he was very disappointed in Putin after the two had a call last week. The next day, Trump said he had a good call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
The Pentagon had paused some weapons deliveries to Ukraine, but Trump says he's now reversing course. Let's listen to that.
Putin is not treating human beings right. He's killing too many people. So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
So who ordered the pause last week?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me?
On a related note, CNN has published audio obtained by 3 authors of a new book. That book titled How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America. The book says that during a 2024 fundraiser before becoming president, Trump told donors what he did to try to prevent Putin from invading Ukraine. Let's listen.
To Putin, I said, if you go in to Ukraine, we're going to bomb the out of Moscow. I'm telling you, I have no choice. The public wants the public. The public. So he goes like, I don't believe you. He said, no way, and I said, way.
Senator Lindsey Graham introduced a new sanctions bill targeting Russia, and he says that Trump now backs it. So here we are. Look, I'm broadly comfortable with how Trump has handled the Russia-Ukraine issue in his second term. He wants to have a peace deal. It's very difficult to get peace at this point. I would blame former President Biden for that, for encouraging the Ukrainian defense to the point where they're now totally on the verge of defeat by Russia. And Russia doesn't want to give up the effort because they think they can just conquer the entire country. And so Trump is in a very difficult negotiating position, but he is trying still to negotiate peace on behalf of Ukraine. And if Russia says they're interested in peace, but is not doing anything to signal that they actually will agree to some kind of peace, then Trump is saying, well, then to hell with them. Then we will continue to fund the Ukrainian defense. And that makes sense to me as a negotiating tactic. So I think I am on board with this. What do you say?
Well, I'll get to Trump in a second, but you said something that I can't really let go by there when you were talking about President Biden, and you said that he had made peace more difficult by encouraging the Ukrainian defense. Ukraine was invaded. a large army seized a significant part of their country. Should he have discouraged their defense? I mean, Ukraine has an interest in maintaining its territorial integrity and not letting a larger neighbor just seize its territory. So there is obviously a moral and political and strategic interest in Ukraine fighting off a Russian invasion.
Biden took the position, he said this, and his State Department said this, that there will be no end to our support for Ukraine. We will defend them to the end, to the last man. And even though military advisors to the U.S. and to Ukraine were very negative about the chance that Ukraine could entirely get Russia out of the country. So I think it was short-sighted to talk to them and have our posture to them be, yeah, we will defend you no matter what till the end of time.
But what would the alternative be?
It should have been a short-term, temporary. Yeah,
but then Putin just out. But then you say we'll support you for 6 months, and Putin knows, well, I'll stay there for 6 months and a day.
But we use those 6 months to do negotiation. That's what.
But what would be the motivation for Putin to negotiate?
To not lose more of his people.
But he would know that he would get what he wanted because the U.S. would withdraw its support at a date certain.
I mean, you're right. If Russia is prepared to pay any cost to conquer all of Ukraine, well, then I don't know what we're doing. Then they're going to succeed at tremendous cost, and that's going to be that. I don't know that I'm going to get the U.S. involved in that point, not without like a formal declaration of war on Russia from our own Congress. But the point is, we're in this situation now, and Trump is trying to get them to sit down, and it seems like Putin, more so than Zelensky actually, is the wanting to continue conflict. And so Trump is going to say, you know, and I put this question to guests we've had on who are more on the negative Ukraine, or Ukraine needs to surrender or give up or negotiate. I'm like, well, if Russia is not going to give any ground whatsoever, what incentive do we or Ukraine have to throw in the towel? And if Putin is committed to conquering the country, then as a negotiating tactic, it's okay for us to say we're going to then defend them more in order to bring them back to the table. So
first off, I don't believe it is certain that a Russian victory overcoming all of Ukraine is inevitable. But to get to the Trump point, to me this more aggressive rhetoric toward Putin points to the fact that Trump, though I think he does have non-interventionist instincts, but beyond that, he has very little ideological consistency on this at all. He does see it purely, I think, as transactional or deal-making, or he wants peace partly for his own aggrandizement. And so when Zelensky irritates him, he blames Ukraine for it being invaded, or he ambushes Zelensky in the Oval Office. And then Putin irritates him, and he says what he said about Putin, or decides that he's going to resume American aid to Ukraine. The problem with that is it leaves even American allies uncertain about exactly what the game plan is, or, you know, will Trump have a bad call with Zelensky tomorrow and will decide to pause support to Ukraine once again? I think all of this sort of volatility, I don't at all buy this sort of cunning madman theory that it keeps people wrong-footed. I just think that it is what it looks like, which is complete inconsistency.
Well, it doesn't, I mean, I'm a pretty ideological person when it comes to all issues in foreign policy, but maybe there's a strength to it not always being ideological. Trump wants peace. He wants to work with Putin, but Putin's not playing ball. Trump's increasingly onto that, and is going to say, okay, if you're, you know, I'm very much for peace and non-interventionism, but if we're dealing with another entity that absolutely wants war and will do war no matter what, that we can't negotiate with or is not willing to negotiate, then I don't know, even the most peace-inclined among us are going to say, well, okay, if that's really what you want, that's what you're going to get. So I have no problem with Trump concluding that, and I hope Putin rethinks this.
The question of him concluding it is one thing. The concern, I think, is that he concludes the opposite the next day, which is, you know, a trademark of Trump and everything from tariffs to foreign wars.
Well, if the posture from Putin changes, then the Trump response should change, is what I would say.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it seems to be much more fueled by personal atmospherics than by any strategic or principled concern, is what I would say.
Coming up, Trump vows no amnesty for illegal migrants workers, while the agricultural secretary offers another solution to replace the deported workers. We will get into that next. Supreme Court has greenlit the Trump administration to launch their plans for mass layoffs and reorganizations at federal agencies. The High Court lifted an order from a lower court which temporarily blocked the dismissal plans of thousands of workers. These changes are set to affect 19 agencies and departments, including the State Department and the Social Security Administration.
And now Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is slamming the ruling and condemning her colleagues who decided in favor of it. Jackson called the order a wrecking ball in a scathing 15-page dissent. She also says recent rulings by the court's conservative majority pose, quote, an existential threat to the rule of law.
Others on social media had different views about the decision. Conservative internet personality Nick Sorter writes, "The lazy, useless hacks in government are headed straight to the unemployment line. Major win. Jackson once again proves she should not be on the court."
Meanwhile, Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren is railing against the ruling, saying of the potential laid-off employees, those are Social Security workers who help seniors get their checks on time, public health workers who keep us safe, and more. Trump wants to make it harder for people to get help.
We're going to disagree on this one, I'm
imagine
sure.
we are, yes.
I am happy about this ruling, but I don't know, though. Would you say that, while I'm sure you're against these layoffs and these reorganizations, I don't know, it is really the argument that the executive of the federal government, the in charge of the federal workforce, has no power or authority to restructure it or to lay off workers? I mean, if that is the case, can government possibly work efficiently? Our government is massive and bloated and bureaucratic. Most people, I know that government is not the same thing as a private organization, certainly, but to be successful and effective in a private market to provide services correctly to people, you have to be able to hire and fire people somewhat at will to restructure departments. That's how large organizations, companies work. If the Supreme Court were to say, no, you have no power to do that whatsoever, I think we would just be totally inept.
But it's not saying that you have no power whatsoever to lay off anyone. It's an argument about the scale of the restructuring. And I do think, although we will disagree on it, that it cuts across ideological lines to some degree, because you are a vigorous defender, I would say, of the role of Congress and of not having an overarching executive. One of the arguments that is made against letting Trump do what he wants in this case is that it would winnow away programs and agencies that have been mandated by Congress to a point where they can no longer do their job. Now, that's the matter that the lower courts have been trying to legislate. The Supreme Court decision that we're talking about has not said, yes, what Trump wants to do is legally right, tick that box, it's all good. They have said, while it has been litigated by the lower courts, this can go ahead. And just briefly, one of the reasons I say that this cuts across ideological lines is Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is ideologically very liberal, is making an argument that I think used to be a sort of old school conservative argument, which is radical change can often have unintended consequences. Therefore, you need to be sure of the wisdom of those changes. She talks about, for example, that the lower courts, that if the Supreme Court had ruled differently yesterday, it would have had the effect of keeping the practical harm-reducing preservation of the status quo, whereas allowing it to go through is allowing, quote, all the harmful upheaval the edict entails while the lower courts evaluate its lawfulness. So those don't seem unreasonable or even particularly left-wing views to me. They seem like arguments for a more temperate approach while the lawfulness of the thing is being decided.
I mean, I guess I would say in response to that, there's a kind of radicalism to just continuing to let the federal government and the growth of the government spiral out of control. And also in terms of that's a good point to bring up congressional oversight. And I certainly wish Congress was more active and more involved in doing restructuring of government. Yes, I think that would be ideal. The worst case, from my point of view, is just leaving it to the agencies themselves, which will never do any pruning ever. They just want to grow. Themselves. That's the worst case scenario. The difference, though, here to me, I'm big into the Constitution and what our founders, how they intended, what role of government they intended. insistent that Congress do more on foreign policy because it was so clear in the writing of our documents and from our founders' perspective that they wanted Congress to be the main body declaring war and deciding foreign policy and just a president that carries it out. With some of this stuff, though, the founders never would have imagined the federal government being a mass employer in the realms of education and healthcare and so much else. So it's almost, I would say it's almost beyond the scope of what they comprehended our government would do. So it's a little bit more, I have less of a insistence that it be managed by Congress, even though I think that would be ultimately for the best, given that we have such a large government as an employer functioning at the way a large corporation does, to not give, at least in the same way that a CEO or managers have a lot of power to restructure the company, to not have our effective CEO have anything approaching that power, for the Supreme Court to say you have nothing approaching that power, seems to me like it's just going to be unworkable.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that you do raise a very fair point about the growth of government in contemporary America versus what the founders envisioned. I mean, that's obviously vastly different. And so that, I think, is a valid point. But I get back to the point that Jackson raised in her ruling, which is this is going to have massive impacts on people who are currently employed by the federal government. At one stage, the VA was talking about laying off 30,000 people. In the face of criticism, they've now pulled back from that to about 10,000. There were also groups, of which the NIH was one, talking about another 10,000 people being laid off. These are things that neither the lower court nor the Supreme Court have decided are legal, because the argument is they may be such a fundamental restructuring that a president does not have the authority to do them. So that fundamental question of legality is up in the air. Meanwhile, we're allowing the layoffs to go ahead. So it's like, yeah, we can just cast these people out onto the unemployment line. We don't really know if it's legal or not, but let's see. That'll be decided at some later point.
Right, well, the Supreme Court is on some level showing its hand, or say, we think this one's probably legal. Other things the Trump administration has decided to do, they've stopped, they've enjoyed. They said, we think this is probably not legal, but we'll check it later, but this is how we feel about it. I mean, they are splitting the baby on some of these things. I think the DOJ cuts to spending that were not rescinded by Congress are going to be reinstated. Some of the stuff Trump's done on immigration gets thrown out. But this is the Supreme Court saying, well, on this one, we think they probably do have this power. Well, so
we shall see.
You win some, you lose some, Niall.
That is certainly true. Elon Musk's chatbot, Grock, is going rogue, firing off a slew of anti-Semitic posts. We'll talk about that next.